Hello dear chess friends from International Chess School. Today we will continue to study different methods to conduct an attack, and we will focus on the first two elements of the attack: the speed of an attack, how quickly one can develop the initiative, and by the help of the tempo moves can create local PC superiority. And connected to this, in both examples that we will follow, we will notice an advanced pawn which assures not only the control over the center, but determines a pawn structure which stops enemy pieces to join defense in proper time. First of all, we will watch a game played in FIDE World Chess Cup between the Grandmasters Mamedyarov Shahryar and Friedman Daniel. The game started with the Bogo-Indian defense: d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, bishop b4 check, bishop d2, and c5. This is a positional approach from Black's point of view. He wants that after bishop takes d4, c takes d4 to hamper knight's b1 development, especially knight c3, and the knight a3 will be forbidden. And after knight bd2, Black will try to create a pawn structure on dark squares with d7, d6, and e6, c5. White took on b4, c takes b4, a3. Right from the beginning, White wants to introduce the rook from a1 into the battle, and right from the sixth move he tries to create a PC superiority. Knight c6. Of course, Black wants to avoid symmetrical pawn structures, since he was in a win situation with the black pieces, which determined the unbalanced character of the game. d5, e takes d5, c takes d5, knight e7. Such pawn advances are good, since if White manages to support the pawn. Otherwise, White will spend too much time, and Black, in the absence of the d pawn, Black will fulfill development. White noticed that after d6, knight c6, the pawn from d6 will play an important role. Not only that assures White's control over the central squares, but at the same time hampers Black's queenside development. And as you will see, this pawn from d6 assured White's attack the speed, and secondly, it creates the favorable circumstances to create a local PC superiority on the king's side. A takes b4. Now the rook can be activated along the fourth rank. Queen b6. In the absence of the dark squares bishops, Black took the control over the dark squares with the queen, attacking the b4 pawn and trying to surround the d6 pawn as well. Knight c3, a calm move. Queen takes b4, and now queen d2. Knight e4 is no longer possible, so the pawn remain on d6, and at the next move White is ready to chase out the black queen from b4. Until now b5 was until this game b5 was the main move, but after e3, rook b8, bishop e2. Again, white will have the lead in development, and the queen from b4 will be isolated and can be the target of white's rook's attack. In the game, black played short castle. It creates a safe home for the king, and maybe black wants to surround the d6 pawn with the knight. As long as black is preoccupied to chase the advanced pawn from d6, white will speed up the attack and will create a local piece superiority. These are two important elements of the attack. e3, rook b8, rook a4, tempo attacking the queen, queen c5, rook c4, queen a5, rook a4. As you already know, black needed to win this game, so he avoided the repetition. Anyway, after queen c5, bishop d3 or bishop e2 will assure white's the initiative. After queen c5, bishop d3, of course the pawn from d6 is untouchable because of bishop takes h7 check queen. Queen d8, bishop d3, a6, short castle, rook e8, knight e4. The point of knight e4 is to deflect the last defender, the knight, from f6, and at the same time to increase the pressure on b1 h7 diagonal. Remember, when you choose the color of squares where to attack, you have to put pressure on light squares, in this case, since you have the light squares bishop, and it would be easier to organize pieces collaboration on light squares attacking f7 and h7. For instance, when black will defend, then white can switch color, but for the time being, the bishop from c8 is out of play, and white will organize the attack against these two pawns, f7 and h7. g6, bishop b1. The bishop is ready to switch the diagonal. Once that black builded a pawn chain h7 g6 on b1 h7 diagonal, white is ready to coordinate the rook and the bishop from a2, the rook from a4, and the bishop from a2 in order to attack the f7 pawn. This is the purpose of bishop b1. Knight takes e4, rook takes e4, b5, rook f4. Slowly, behind the shield of the d6 pawn, white is bringing fresh chessmen into attack. It has for the moment 3 attacking pieces, and when he will manage to introduce the queen into the battle, it may have a devastating effect. Bishop b7, bishop a2, rook f8. Now the rook will be passive, only the pawns are defending the king, and remember that white is attacking on light squares. Actually, the bishop from b7 cannot participate in defense. It has a long diagonal at his disposal, but the bishop can't be coordinated with the knight or with the passive queen from d8. And during this time, white is trying to demolish black's pawn structure from the king side. He played h4 in order to push h5, h takes g6, and then to bring the queen on g4 in conjunction with the knight g5, for example, and with the queen on g4 or h4, it would be very, very powerful. King g7, h5, f6. Now black tries to create another blockade on dark squares. e4, very important. Actually, white releases the queen d2 activity on c1 h6 diagonal, and it prepares a knight sacrifice on g5 for 2 pawns. The purpose of this kind of sacrifice is to discover the black's king position and to create the local PC superiority. Please remember that you need at least 3 pieces, 1 to be sacrificed and 2 to continue the attack, even if the attack finishes with mate or with a double attack and gaining of the material advantage. g5. Now as you can see, the black king is cut on a2 g8 diagonal. It can leave the g and h files, and white adds more speed to the attack, sacrificing another pawn. h6, check, king h6, the only move, rook f5. Now 3 pieces are coordinated in the attack against the g5 pawn, while the bishop from a2 has the guardian role over the a2 g8 diagonal. King g7, knight takes g5. Now f takes g5, rook takes g5, king h8 leads to a devastating attack on a1 h8 diagonal, queen c3, and unfortunately for black, queen f6 doesn't work because of rook g8. Now you can see the same overburdened reason. The rook from f8 has to defend g8 and f6 at the same time, which is not possible. Usually when one creates a local PC superiority, one of the defender tend to be overburdened. Focus on this kind of tactics or tactical operations. Queen a5, black tries to trade the queens and then to take the knight from g5. b4, an excellent idea, deflecting the queen from the a file. Anyway, queen f4 was winning anyway. Queen takes b4, queen f4 now, knight d4, queen g4. The black king is surrounded. The knight is untouchable. After f takes g5, queen takes g5, again we have a nice mate. King h8, rook takes f8, releasing the 5th rank for the queen, and then the king will be trapped in the middle, in the corner, with both diagonals controlled by white. So black played king h8, knight takes h7. Eventually the attack on light squares succeeded. The black king is completely naked. Of course, after king takes h7, rook h5 will follow. Black took on f5, knight takes f5, and here white took on f8, but after queen h5 his attack is unstoppable. It threatens knight g5 followed by queen h7 mate, and after a natural move like king g7, e takes f5, queen e4, queen g6, defending g2 at the same time, king h8, knight takes f8. Of course, rook takes f8 fails due to queen h6 mate, and after queen g2, queen takes g2, bishop takes g2, knight g6, king g7, king takes g2. White has two extra pieces. A very powerful example of how you should add speed to your attack, how to activate pieces from early moments of the opening. And the most important thing was the advanced pawn from d6, which hampered black's attempt to defend the king's side. In the next example, we will following the same scenario. It is a position extracted from the game Karyakin versus Ivanchuk. Both are top grandmasters, played in July 2011 at the King's Tournament. As you can see, the position arises from the Austrian attack of the modern defense, and White's bishops are already directed against Black's king side. Powerful controls over b1 h7 and c1 h6 diagonal. During this time, Black chose a Benoni setup, but these pieces from the queen side can hardly participate in defense. One more time, notice the static center and the powerful pawn from d5, which hampers Black's counterplay in the center. If the center is stable, this means that White can start an attack, and we have the first element of the attack, the speed. White can increase the speed behind the shield assured by the impressive pawn center. White played queen e1 here. The plan is simple and is usually met in the Grand Prix attack. White wants to install the queen on h4 and then to push f4, f5, followed by bishop h6 or knight g5. This depends if White wants to create some weak squares on dark squares or not. The most important thing for White is that after f4, f5, Black is unable to control the e5 square with the knight, or to penetrate with the knight on e5, since the knight is on c7, which means that the knight is passive and can't participate in defense. Black reacted naturally, e6. If White prepares such a brutal kingside attack, Black has to react in the center. After d takes e6, bishop takes e6 will allow f4, f5, and White's attack will go on. Then bishop g5 and queen h4 in conjunction with the rook from f1 will exert terrible pressure on h4, d8 diagonal. In such cases, when you start an attack, you have a favorable pawn structure. You see that you can create a local piece superiority. In this case, White has a huge amount of chessments on the king side. It is important that your pieces are collaborating, and in our case we can see that the queen and the bishop from c1 can collaborate on dark squares. After f takes c6, besides the dark squares, also the light squares pawns became weak around the black king. White pushed e5, and again we have such a powerful pawn on e5, which determines the black queen to be out of play. The pawn from e5 controls the important square f6, and the queen will be unable to defend the king. Of course, the main reason behind e4 e5 is that is chasing out the defender of the h7 pawn. The knight will be forced to move. Knight f d7, maybe knight h5 would be preferable, but it's hard to believe that the knight at the rim can do more. Knight e4, of course the side which has the space advantage assured by the central pawn from e5, and it is in attack, should avoid minor pieces exchanges. White is bringing extra pieces in attack. Now take a look. The knight from e4, the bishop from d3, the knight from f3, the queen, the rook, the bishop from c1. It makes 6 pieces participating in attack, when black defends only with the bishop from g7 and these pawns h7 and g6. d takes e5, f takes e5, bishop b7. Black doesn't feel the danger. His bishop, exactly like in the previous example, is attacking on a8 h1 diagonal, but such a domination is useless on a diagonal, since white has the control over the center and black's pieces are completely uncoordinated. Bishop g5. This is a tempo move which speeds up the attack. Queen d7, queen h4. White is bringing the queen on dark squares, and there are 4 forces which are collaborating to control the f6 square. Sooner or later white will penetrate with the knight on f6, and then he can bring either a pawn or a bishop on f6, dominating the dark squares. Knight b4, it is too late and too slow. Black is trying to exchange the powerful knight from e4 with the bishop. Rook a d1. The last piece is brought into attack. Please notice that black forces are completely out of play. Knight b4, knight c7, bishop b7 and rook a8 are completely out of play, and the queen can't participate also in defense because of the powerful e5 pawn. Remember, such a pawn structure which stops enemy pieces to join defense on proper time. Queen c6, there is a certain threat based on this diagonal, but white has plenty of pieces on that diagonal. Knight f6 check, bishop takes f6, and there's the point of the attack. The rook from d1 will be coordinated with the queen attacking h7. At the same time, white realized that after e takes f6, the knight can jump on e5, attacking the vulnerable pawn from g6, but the knight from e5 can support also rook d7. So bishop g6 was the intermediate move. H takes g6, bishop takes f6, threatening mate with the queen h8 followed by queen g7. So black is forced to give an exchange back. Rook takes f6, e takes f6, and even if black is up from material point of view, it has more pieces. In fact, white has a crushing attack. There are very dangerous threats like queen g5 followed by knight e5, rook d7, and f7, bringing the rook from f1 also into the battle. Rook f8, trying to stop f7 for the time being. Queen g5, and black resigned. If black is forced to play queen e8 here, then is a sad position. White can simply play knight e5, preparing f6, f7 with check queen or rook d7. The point of f7 is to interfere the pawn or the rook on e8, h5 diagonal, after which queen takes g6 would be possible. I suggest you to train with such positions and try to analyze the four elements of the attack: the speed, the possibility of creating a PC superiority to have more attackers than defenders. Take a look at the third element, which is the pawn structure, and then at the weak squares in conjunction with the pawn structure. And don't forget to choose the main color of squares on where you will attack, and this color is determined by the pieces who coordinates the attack. In our case, it was the dark squares, where the bishop from c1 and the queen from e1 were coordinated. Till